I'm very excited to introduce our keynote speaker, Ms. Doreen Harris. Doreen was appointed President and CEO of the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA, on April 7th, 2021, after serving as acting president and CEO since 2020. President Harris has been instrumental in leading NYSERDA's role to advance the policy frameworks, clean energy technologies, and solutions to help further New York's clean energy transition, while creating hundreds of thousands of good-paying clean energy jobs and building an equitable economy, which is what we're all here for. Under President Harris's direction, NYSERDA is supporting New York's nation-leading clean energy initiatives through advancing infrastructure and innovation, large-scale and distributed renewables, building decarbonization, energy storage, transportation, electrification, clean fuels, transmission, and resiliency. She's got quite a job. So without further ado, Ms. Harris, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. I do want to thank you and the entire Renewable Energy Long Island team for having me here to speak today. I know you just heard from a number of my colleagues at NYSERDA. I also want to recognize are Stevens and or Talia on? Are you on from the governor's office?
I
Yes.
am, Doreen. Hi, how are you? Yes, I'm the governor of Suffolk County Regional Rep. Nice to see you all.
There we are. Thanks for joining today. And specifically, I really appreciated the introductions as a general matter because it helps me better understand who's in the proverbial room. So I appreciate that opportunity as well. So yeah, I'll provide a few remarks and then I'm happy to take some questions. In general, I'm here really wanting you to know, at least on a personal level, how thankful I am to be working in the state of New York right now, and how thankful I am specifically for the ways in which Governor Hochul has demonstrated her leadership on these issues and generally has maintained that leadership in a very durable way that helps us all grow our economy, but also organizations like your own in a manner that helps us really better serve New Yorkers across our state. So I certainly in the world in which we're working these days, I want to start by saying that first and foremost, that we're all pretty lucky to be New Yorkers as far as I'm concerned. And with that in mind, when we looked at the governor's State of the State address, it was really reflective of a number of different imperatives that I'd like to reflect on in the most general of senses, and then happy again to talk about specific topics that may be more relevant in your day-to-day work. And I think, foundationally, as those of you who participated in the process of the governor's issuance of her State of the State address, as well as her executive budget, what she is demonstrating is the ability to front and center put the topic of affordability that has been really the linchpin of this year's policy objectives. But I think critically, what we are demonstrating is the ways in which we can place affordability through the lens of our sustained commitment to the energy transition and to leaving no New Yorker behind in that transition as well. And I think that's really the central theme that is, in my view, the through line of this year's policy agenda is to not only continue the pursuit of our clean energy transition, but to take the principles of equity and affordability as central tenets of how we get from here to there. And so when we look at the components of this year's State of the State address, it really is important for me to sort of start even before that, in which the governor not only signed the Climate Change Superfund legislation last year. That is an act that has been already followed by other states, and I think it's very important to say that we are looking at the wrongs of the past, but also we are planning for our future. And I think her commitment to the congestion pricing requirements really has been reflective of that leadership that she's exemplified. And then as we sort of look at the ways in which her State of the State address and the ultimate budget that is being negotiated now, it really builds on those actions. First, with the commitment toward the $1 billion Sustainable Future program. That is a huge inclusion within her executive budget, something that the state is really looking at the ways in which we can deploy major capital projects, those that can be bondable, those that are focusing on the hardest to decarbonize sectors of our economy, like buildings and transportation. Really putting that to work in the very near term is reflective of the commitment, not just to the past, but to the future. And when I look at that $1 billion, it is the largest climate investment ever in the budget. It's a landmark commitment, and it's one that I'm personally really excited about in the coming year, putting that money to work in these communities that you represent all across our state in the very near term as well. And so when I think about the ways in which we as a state are embodying these priorities of the governors, I really do. That's why I was so appreciative of understanding where each of you come from, not only with all aspects of our state from a geography perspective, but really focusing on what I view as the most important part of a successful energy transition, which is how do we get really into our communities? How do we get local? And how do we ensure that we are meeting every New Yorker where they are, not only with tools and information, but foundationally the ability to benefit from this transition as well. And so that comes, of course, for those of you working in one of our 12 clean energy hubs, it comes through in the ways in which I'm sure you engage every day as we build out these hubs as a resource across our state, but also the ways in which we can help New Yorkers have access to programs, to tools, to resources, and I think importantly to job opportunities that are available in this economy. Every year we produce a clean energy jobs report that looks at the ways in which our clean energy industry is growing. And this year was just an extraordinary year for job growth, far outpacing the growth of our state writ large. 178,000 clean energy workers across our state. And one of the things that we need to make sure New Yorkers are aware of is really the opportunity that this presents for them for long-term durable careers in this industry. And so the governor's commitment not only to the small businesses, but also to broadly to economic growth is quite evident, not only with her commitment to SUNY and CUNY, but also the ways in which she's investing in her budget, including $300 million to make ready sites for new businesses across our state as well. And so I know not all of you are from Long Island, but I think it's important to note Long Island is much like the rest of the state in saying that we really see this. I liken it to really needing to look at this transition over a series of years, because of course in the day-to-day, it's not as obvious perhaps, but when you really zoom out and look at each of the regions that you represent, I hope that you're seeing this change occur in ways that are really not only transforming our communities, but benefiting New Yorkers at the same time. And of course, there's any one of a number of resources I could reference, but of course, it all starts with the grid. We've got on Long Island our first offshore wind project operating. We should not discount that progress. And we have 2 other projects under active construction as we speak. And the ways in which specifically Long Island, but honestly, when you look across the whole state, that our state has responded to this opportunity space is really quite impressive and reflective of the fact that even if a project is 30 miles off our coast, the fact that folks in Western New York can benefit from that is very impressive as well. But also more and more, we certainly have major investments in other forms of energy, solar being a great example. Increasingly, we see the ways in which New York is really leading the way in community solar in particular, benefiting New Yorkers from the perspective of bill savings, but also the jobs that are really driving that industry across our state as well. But it is time. I'd like to also just talk about some longer range planning that we have underway. This is where we are actually in the process of executing on our state energy plan. I chair the state's energy planning board. It sounds like a very sort of wonky long-term process, and in some ways it is, but I think very importantly, it's allowing us to look at the needs of our state for our energy systems in the coming decades. And that's where we really look at the massive scale up of transportation electrification, building efficiency, building decarbonization, and some of the resources that will be really necessary to complement the renewable resources. So we've started in concert with the New York Public Service Commission, focusing on technologies like hydrogen technologies or advanced geothermal technologies, or yes, advanced nuclear technologies that are all increasingly available in the market, and those that we think can provide similar benefits to our state beyond the progress that we're already making in other types of sectors. And so as I sort of wrap up my remarks, one thing that's, I think, very interesting to me to think about is around NYSERDA's 50th anniversary. So NYSERDA was actually founded in 1975. We were the product of the energy crisis of the 70s. Many of you will remember the realities of living in the 70s and the very strong insecurity that we felt with respect to our energy systems at that time. So we were actually reconstituted from the state's Atomic and Space Development Authority, and for 50 years have really built out both the programs and the planning to help us get from here to there. And in the 50 years that come, as we plan forward, it's just only going to continue. There's a lot of corollaries to where we sit today versus the 70s. We have the added complexity of the climate crisis that is changing our climate and the ways in which we live and work every day. But I'm very proud, not only, as I said, to live and work in New York State, certainly under the governor's leadership, but also to lead an organization that can really have a massive impact with each of you as partners. We've learned over those 50 years, this is all local, really, and we need to be more present in our local communities. The folks from NYSERDA you see here today, that's their job, day in and day out, to provide the tools and resources necessary to help these communities thrive and grow. And that's really what you can expect, not just this year, but in the coming years as our energy transition takes shape, as we continue to benefit from these investments, and certainly as we continue to drive forward the agenda for New York that so many others are following. So with that, just awfully glad to speak with each of you. I'm happy to take questions. I think there's time, and I'll turn it back to you, Melissa.
Thank you, Doreen. So yes, if you have some questions, please just use that raise hand feature. And Kareem, you're on.
Thank you, Ms. Harris, for sharing your thoughts. The question about one of the last things you said one thing you've learned, or that NYSERDA has learned over the last 50 years, is that this is all local.
Yep.
And about the need to be in more local communities. Could you elaborate on that? What elements of this is all local? The messaging, the work, the workforce, the need for support on policy for things to shift. Like just curious what your thoughts are and your reflections are. Obviously, there are things that have to happen on a statewide level, or maybe regional, or as a national level, but what are your learnings around the importance of the local work?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It is the case, of course, that we have to operate in a global environment, certainly in a federal environment, and also New York can't do this alone. So that remains true. We need others to be advancing similar policies, technologies, et cetera, because of the market momentum that it will provide. However, I think one of the things that is increasingly obvious to us, at least to me, is the fact that we need to have not only support from everyone, right? From everyone, but we also need to be sure that objective, credible information is shared with consumers of all types. And that's been a major shift, I think, in the 50 years that NYSERDA has been in existence, is that we have a circumstance in which we, NYSERDA, this is foundationally true, that our job is to be an objective, credible resource. And you, many of you, are helping us achieve that objective in your day-to-day work. But it is also the case that a lot of this transition amounts to individual decision making. And so if we are unable to ensure that that objective, credible information finds its way to the consumers, well, we're going to be in a hard spot, right? People get information from a lot of sources, and trust is really at the core of how people make decisions. And our job, at least in part, is to make sure that those decisions are made with the facts. And so this persists in so many different ways. One of the best examples right now is the electric school bus work that we're doing through the Environmental Bond Act. And that on the one hand, this is very much a program in which we're deploying $500 million to help school districts deploy electric school buses. But on the other hand, this is a technology that a lot of communities haven't worked with, right? So what do they need to have? The school districts, the operators, the parents, the public who is voting to buy these buses. Like, our job is not just to provide grants to buy a bus, but it's to make sure that that the tools and resources are available to allow these communities to make informed decisions. And that's true with pretty much any other piece of work that we do, that it really needs to get down to the local level, or I guess I would say up to the local level, in order to effectuate the programs and policies that we're here to do.
Thank you. Melissa Everett, did you have a question?
I've changed my mind 4 times about whether I have a question, but yeah, I mean, just following that up, we see so much good local work around education. We know that you're investing a lot in the hubs, but I have been just hungering for kind of another level of resources for more scalable, more coordinated, maybe more sophisticated education for the public, so that towns can learn from how other towns have handled, battery storage and school bus, all the different controversies. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Melissa. It is the case that I would not say that we've reached the pinnacle of our ability to coordinate these resources, and I say that because obviously we have DEC in the meeting, and I think that's an important aspect of this. Is that, at least my observation, I'd be very interested in your thoughts, is that it is the case that there's a lot of ways in which we're sort of touching communities. Just speaking for NYSERDA, of course, we have the Clean Energy Communities Program, some of whom you are representing here today. We have the regional clean energy hubs that are really hitting their stride. We also have a clean energy siting team who literally goes in and will, as you probably well know, will work with any host community to provide information that they may be needing to help in their own decision making. And then, of course, we have the DEC Climate Smart Communities work that is adjacent. There's some places, as you well know, of interaction. There's other places where they aren't intended to do the same thing. And I can imagine that results in some market complexity from the perspective of the communities. I think in part that's really what we're trying to get at with the ways in which we're at least proposing to evolve the Clean Energy Communities Program, which is to provide the cohorts that are the access, if you will, to cohorts through which these communities can be learning from one another. Back to the topic of trust. who do you trust? Certainly if you're next door, the next town over has deployed a technology and has lessons learned from it, that's actually a very useful way to learn as well. But I honestly, NYSERDA folks, if you have anything to add, I'd welcome it, but I do think this is a necessary evolution.
Yeah, this is Kelly here. I was just going to add, and I'm glad you brought it up. One of the things that we are planning are the cohorts, which was mentioned, and again, that is really a way where we're trying to give local resources because we know that communities are constrained, but really get you talking even more to one another, and perhaps more importantly, learning and doing projects together. So we recognize that, and I'm glad that you brought that up, Melissa, because it's also something that we've heard over and over again as well.
Great, thank you. And I'll just go as the next is Jocelyn.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you, Doreen, and your team
Yes.
for your
We had a
leadership.
great time at the with the secretary, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
you have a good memory. Yes.
And the governor, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you for this opportunity, and especially at this juncture in times that are difficult moments, especially when it comes to climate change conversation and clean energy. And I know how your team and you have worked at putting this front and center. But we are going in a crunch time, especially at the federal level, and even for us that are on the ground, being in terms of scenario planning, because of the difficulty and unpredictability of funding when it comes from the federal level. So how we can work together, whether it is from receiving, how do we can better prepare ourselves when a scenario planning, also if NYSERDA has a scenario planning in place that can help us also deliver. Also, there's a workforce. If we are concerned, also our own employees and prospective employee as to the stability of where we stand. So it will be great to have tools that we may have, like which program, even for us, we may be looking at that may be that they are maybe downsizing, or what programs we are able to say that we are that the concern should not be there, and how do we can continue to make sure that we are developing these programs. And like we mentioned, also best practices in place, and even how also NYSERDA, and sorry for the long, but can look at ways that can help us out, especially when it comes to receiving reimbursement and fund, and on the funding, is there's internal procedures that may increase the time that it takes to get reimbursement.
Yeah. Well, obviously we're staying on top of federal actions, just as you are. Every day has some new information that seems to emerge, and it is, I'd say, difficult, right, to operate in a world of uncertainty. And I'm sure that's true for you as well. We've obviously been very aware of some of the ways in which federal funding has been frozen, or access has been impacted, and I know our teams are regularly reporting to me on the specifics, and I would say it impacts NYSERDA as well. So what I'm wanting you to know, I think, is that we don't actually have all the answers with respect to what impact the federal administration is going to have. Every day, as I said, is a different situation that we're operating within. So I can't provide certainty on that front, but what I can provide certainty on is the commitment that we have as a state, which is one of the reasons I'm glad to be sitting here in Manhattan today, is because we work in a state, and certainly for a governor who is committed, and we've seen her act in ways that are reflective of the fact that she's really looking out for New Yorkers, first and foremost, but that means that our commitment also to the clean energy investments that we're making and our partnerships remain unchanged. And so all I would say is that over those 50 years, we've worked in many, many, many federal administrations. By my count, it was 9. And our work has continued. I'm cognizant that in the day-to-day, this is a stressful situation, I'm sure, for many. But rest assured, we are durable, and our partnership will forge on.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. So we're at 12:05, but we have one more question if you have the time.
course.
Okay, great. Okay, Josh.
Thank you. And mine will be along the lines of what Yoselin was just asking, but very, very targeted and specific. One of the big federal priorities that New York LCV focused on in the last Congress or 2 Congresses ago was the Inflation Reduction Act. And we're working very hard in real time to defend the IRA. One aspect in particular, which I think is of great interest to this particular group, and Dazzle and I were on a panel last week talking about it, was the direct and elective pay components by which municipalities, not-for-profits, House of Worship can access. Really terrific program and a game changer in many respects. And so my question was 2-part, the degree to which IRA funding coming in, I know there's been freeze, unfreeze, whatever, but if it gets to the point that seems to be untenable, will NYSERDA be, seeing the president in court like others have already said and have already done to really make sure that the flow continues uninterrupted. And then the other part of it is, are there ways that we could be supportive to NYSERDA in terms of, collecting stories from stakeholders who are reliant upon those funds so that we can then help to make that case to our congressional delegation to really stand up and fight for this program and against any particular cuts that's going to be happening over the next few weeks for this joint a reconciliation budget maneuver that's happening in Congress.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the question. So I'll just start at the highest level. When we were advancing some of our analysis through the Climate Action Council a few years ago, and we really saw these policies, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act, we immediately actually took a hard look at really the benefits that New York could accrue to New York because of the passage of those bills. And it was significant. I mean, it was on the order of $70 billion that really made a big difference in the analysis that we had through the Climate Action Council. So I say all this because it's extraordinarily relevant for the state of New York in the most significant of senses. And even down to the details, right? We all need to be in Washington. We all need to be identifying ways in which we can make human, right, the impacts that the IRA has had. And I would strongly encourage each of you to think about ways in which you can provide those that's what people respond to is the specifics, but also the personal realities that this policy has brought forth, and of course the benefits thereof. I can't say what the state attorneys general will do, but I would say as you've seen even over the past number of weeks, the state of New York, through our attorney general and often in partnership with other states, have taken a position in a manner that has in part helped us all maintain the market momentum that we very much need. And obviously we'd have to look at the circumstances, but long and short of it is these are very significant policies, and those that New York, of course, will continue to defend.
Appreciate that. Look what the governor of Pennsylvania did the other day. He took him to court, and the money's got unfrozen. So that's a great pathway forward to stand up.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. This group, as you saw, is a statewide climate energy network. We all have the same goals with the hub and all of our leaders, and we really appreciate you and what you do. And please know you could tap into all of the resources that we provide if we could be of any assistance.
Great. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think you have more meeting to have, right?
Yes.
So I will drop with my thanks. Have a great day, everyone, and I hope to see you out and about very soon.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harris.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.